In October 2023, international analysts were drawn to a seemingly minor but troubling detail. At an important event of China's Central Military Commission, General He Weidong, one of the highest-ranking commanders of the People's Liberation Army and the Commission's vice-chairman, was absent. Before that, he regularly appeared in public, took part in official meetings, and his name was mentioned in news reports and official statements. But suddenly, he disappeared. No explanations, no statements, no comments from the authorities. In the context of the Chinese political system, such disappearances are nothing new. However, He Weidong's high profile, his proximity to key military processes, and his involvement in reforms made this pause especially noticeable. The number of questions kept growing. Some sources claimed he was removed as part of an anti-corruption campaign, others spoke of an internal investigation, and still others suggested the elimination of a potential rival within the organization. The authorities did not disclose any information about his fate. He Weidong's name began to disappear from official reports. He stopped appearing at subsequent meetings and his photo was removed from some government websites. Some analysts interpreted this as a sign of a quiet resignation. Others spoke of his detention. But none of these assumptions were confirmed. China is a country where the disappearance of high-ranking officials is often linked to internal investigations, which are frequently kept secret. Similar incidents have previously happened with ministers, diplomats, and even heads of major state-owned corporations. However, the case of He Weidong stands out because of its scale. This is not just about a military official, but one of the key figures in the army's leadership. This disappearance became part of a broader wave of reshuffles, which later affected other military leaders as well. And one of the most striking examples was the following case. Li Shangfu, China's Minister of Defense, who had held the post for less than a year, vanished from the public eye in August 2023. He missed an important meeting with Vietnamese representatives and then failed to appear at an international security forum. The ministry's press office gave no explanation, and party representatives refused to comment. Amid complete silence, speculation began to spread in the media. Some of these pointed to his possible involvement in a corruption case within the defense sector. Other sources suggested that he had become the subject of an internal party investigation. The international press also hinted at disagreements over military cooperation with other countries. However, all these theories remained mere speculation. None of them were officially confirmed. Li Shangfu is a prominent figure. Before being appointed minister, he oversaw issues related to armaments and equipment, including procurement and modernization. His biography included work in the space industry and a technical education. He was considered an advocate of accelerated technological modernization of the army. The lack of official comments fueled interest. After some time, Chinese official sources stopped mentioning his name. Later, it was announced that he had been relieved of his post. The reasons were not disclosed, however. The media continued to discuss a possible connection between his disappearance and a series of inspections in the defense sector. This case turned out not to be an isolated one. Disappearances and arrests of high-ranking officials in China have become regular occurrences in recent years. But when it comes to the head of the defense ministry, the situation takes on special significance. All the more so since similar events had already occurred in another region of the world. In February 2007, Brigadier General Ali Reza Asghari, former Deputy Minister of Defense of Iran, flew to Turkey on a private visit. He checked into a hotel in Istanbul but disappeared the next day. His belongings were left in the room, there was no contact with him, and the Iranian authorities declared him missing. Very soon, a theory emerged about a possible abduction. Asghari was not just an officer, he held one of the key positions in Iran's defense structure and had close ties to the elite military unit, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Moreover, according to several Western sources, he possessed important information about Iran's nuclear program and its connections with the Hezbollah movement. After some time, Western media began to put forward the theory that Asghari had voluntarily defected to the West. Newspapers reported on an allegedly organized operation by the CIA or Mossad, the goal of which was to extract and interrogate a high-ranking insider. Iranian officials, on the other hand, claimed that he had fallen victim to a kidnapping by intelligence agencies. No official information about his whereabouts ever emerged. Asghari's whereabouts remain unknown to this day. In Iran, he is considered to have disappeared under mysterious circumstances, while abroad he is seen as a defector with highly valuable information. This case became one of the most high-profile episodes in the history of disappearances of high-ranking military officials and once again demonstrated how fragile the line can be between personal safety and state secrets, especially when someone knows too much. This is exactly what the next figure in our story faced. In August 2010, the body of a man without identification was found on the coast of Turkey. Later, forensic analysis established that it was Yuri Ivanov, the deputy head of the main intelligence directorate of the Russian General Staff, one of the most secretive organizations in the country. He was reportedly on vacation at the time. According to the official version, Ivanov drowned while swimming and his body washed ashore several days later. However, many details do not fit the standard picture of an accident. First of all, the distance between the supposed drowning site and where the body was found was more than 70 miles. That's too far for an ordinary current. Secondly, there were no witnesses to the incident, and local residents claimed that no one saw him enter the water. Thirdly, there was no explanation as to why he was vacationing in that particular area and why his movements were not being monitored by the security service. Later, sources reported that Ivanov might have been involved in coordinating GRU overseas operations. Some journalists suggested that he possessed important information that could have attracted the interest of foreign intelligence agencies. Nevertheless, there were no leaks, no investigations, and no confessions. His death officially remained a closed case. Ivanov's case became high-profile precisely because of his position. The deputy head of one of the most powerful intelligence agencies cannot simply disappear without a trace unless there is something much bigger behind it. Or someone. But such events have not only occurred in recent history. Sometimes the disappearance of generals happens in a completely different context. For example, in Poland 100 years ago. In the summer of 1927, Polish General Włodzimierz Zagorski disappeared under mysterious circumstances. He boarded a plane that took off from Lviv to Warsaw, and no one ever saw him again. Neither the plane, nor the body, nor any wreckage was ever found. Since then, Zagorski has been considered missing, and his fate remains one of the most unsolved mysteries in the history of the Polish army. Zagorski was not just a military man. He played an active role in the events following World War I, held influence in the army, and was also involved in a sharp political conflict with Marshal Józef Piłsudski's camp. Some historians suggest that it was precisely this political struggle that may have been the cause of his disappearance. At that time, Poland was undergoing large-scale transformations, and the removal of inconvenient figures was not uncommon. One theory suggests that his plane may have been shot down. Others claim he was arrested upon arrival and secretly eliminated. However, there is no official confirmation of any of this. The case files remain partially classified to this day, and the Polish government has made no attempts to reopen the investigation. Masunobu Tsuji, an officer in the Japanese army during World War II, was one of the most controversial figures of his time. He was not only a combat commander but also a strategist who developed several key military operations, including the attack on Pearl Harbor and the Malayan Campaign. After Japan's surrender, his name appeared on the list of individuals suspected of war crimes. However, Tsuji managed to avoid arrest, hiding first in Thailand and then in other Southeast Asian countries. Subsequently, he returned to Japan, became a member of parliament, and for some time was even part of the circle of high-ranking politicians. This seemed incredible for a person with such a past. However, in 1961, during a trip to Laos, he suddenly disappeared. He was last seen in Phnom Penh, after which all traces of him vanished. Many theories were put forward, from being killed by intelligence agencies to going underground. Some claimed that he became a victim of interstate games during the Cold War. Others believed that he was eliminated by his own people to prevent information leaks. Officially, he was declared dead only 7 years after his disappearance. However, no remains were ever found. To this day, it is unknown where and under what circumstances he might have died. Bahtiyar Aydin was a general in the Turkish gendarmerie. In 1993, he was shot dead in the Diyarbakir province, a region where, at the time, active fighting was taking place between the Turkish army and the forces of the Kurdistan Workers' Party. Official reports stated that the general was killed by a sniper's bullet during a clash with Kurdish militants. However, doubts about this version began to emerge later on. An investigation conducted many years after his death yielded unexpected results. It turned out that the circumstances of the incident did not match the initial report. Moreover, discrepancies were recorded in the actions of the units that were near the scene of the tragedy. Some witnesses claimed that the gunfire came from areas controlled by government forces. Others mentioned a strange delay in medical assistance and subsequent disinformation. Later, information surfaced that General Aydin may have opposed certain methods of conducting military operations and tried to draw the command's attention to the issue of violations in the conflict zone. This led to speculation that his elimination might have been connected not only to Kurdish resistance but also to internal disagreements. This story remained closed for a long time, and the official version never revisited. However, in archival documents that began to be declassified years later, Aydin's name appears more and more often, not only in the context of military operations but also of internal disagreements. His death is an example of how, even in peacetime, a person can die under circumstances that raise more questions than answers. Heinrich Müller is one of the most wanted criminals after the end of World War II. In May 1945, he disappeared without a trace. His last known location was a bunker in Berlin where he stayed during the final days of the war. After Germany's surrender, he was not found among either the dead or the captured. This gave rise to numerous theories. One of the most popular is that he died in the bunker and was buried under a false name. However, neither American nor Soviet intelligence found any evidence to support this version. Others believed that Müller escaped and lived under a new name. There were reports of his possible appearance in South America, as well as speculation about his cooperation with Soviet intelligence services. In 1963, the CIA declassified some materials that discussed attempts to find him. However, no convincing evidence about his fate was ever presented. Israeli intelligence was also interested in Müller, but never found a single lead. His absence among the arrested Nazi criminals remains a mystery to this day. Müller's story is interesting in that, despite the significance of his figure and large-scale international efforts, he was never found. Perhaps he really did die in the final days of the war, perhaps he disappeared with someone's help, or perhaps he was eliminated as a bearer of dangerous information. Amelia Earhart was the first female pilot to make a solo flight across the Atlantic. She disappeared in July 1937 during a round-the-world journey. Her plane, the Lockheed Electra, disappeared over the Pacific Ocean near Howland Island. Neither she nor her navigator Fred Noonan nor the plane itself were ever found. According to the official version, Earhart went off course and lost contact with the Coast Guard ship. A possible cause is considered to be a lack of fuel and a crash into the ocean. However, the absence of wreckage, bodies, or any traces gave rise to dozens of theories. Some suggest that she made an emergency landing on one of the remote atolls. Others believe she was captured by the Japanese and died in captivity. Some think that she survived and lived under a different name. For decades, researchers have tried to reconstruct her route. Underwater expeditions were conducted, and archives, letters, and radio transmissions were studied. In the 2000s, bones were found that were believed to belong to a woman of European descent, but the results were not convincing enough. The story of Amelia Earhart is one of the most famous disappearances in history. Her case continues to inspire cinema, literature, and research. It became a symbol of a mysterious disappearance where personal courage, technological progress, and the forces of nature converged at a single point. But there are disappearances that are far more technological and on a much larger scale. On the night of March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, a passenger plane, disappeared from radar. It was on a flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. There were 239 people on board. 40 minutes after takeoff, the plane stopped responding to radio signals, and after some more time, it disappeared from the tracking system. A large-scale search began, involving dozens of countries. The initial search area was located in the South China Sea and later in the Indian Ocean. Debris was found that most likely belonged to MH370, but the fuselage and black boxes were never discovered. The investigation considered several theories. Among them were catastrophic failure, electronic shutdown, pilot intervention, hijacking, and even sabotage. However, none of these theories has been fully confirmed. The main hypothesis is that the pilot deliberately changed course and directed the plane to a remote area of the ocean where it crashed. But the motivation, reasons, and confirmation remain unclear. The disappearance of MH370 became one of the largest and most inexplicable incidents in the history of civil aviation. Despite technological progress, satellite surveillance, and global communication, a plane with hundreds of people on board was able to literally vanish. And if in the 21st century an entire airliner can disappear, then the disappearance of a single person, even a very important one, becomes a matter of time, system, and necessity. By piecing together the stories of the disappearances of generals, officers, and other high-ranking figures, several consistent patterns can be identified. Firstly, almost all those who disappeared had access to sensitive information, whether it was intelligence data, defense contracts, internal conflicts, or corruption schemes. Secondly, their departure from public life was accompanied either by complete silence or by formal statements without any explanation. One of the most common theories is internal purging. In this interpretation, disappearance is a way to protect the system from leaks, conflicts, or reputational threats. Such a practice is especially relevant for authoritarian and centralized models of governance, but it also occurs in democratic countries, albeit in different forms. Another theory involves operations by foreign intelligence agencies. This is mentioned particularly often in the context of defectors, as in the case of General Asghari. In these cases, disappearance is part of a specially organized operation, the result of negotiations, recruitment, or a deal. The third theory is self-exclusion. Sometimes officers go underground by their own decision, out of fear, political disagreement, or for security reasons. Such cases are extremely rare, but they have occurred in history. Fourth, death under unclear circumstances, accidents, natural factors, sudden illnesses. All of this can be either a coincidence or part of a chain of more complex events. Without convincing evidence, this remains at the level of hypothesis. All these theories exist in parallel, and in most cases, it is impossible to choose a single, definitive one. This is precisely the main conclusion. The disappearance of a high-ranking military official is not always the result of drama or conspiracy, but it is always a signal that something significant is happening behind the scenes of the system, something people prefer not to speak about openly.